Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us, whatever platform you're listening to us on, wherever in the world you're listening to us. I know I say it every single episode, but I cannot thank you guys enough for the support and for sharing this podcast to others. It's really been a treat to kind of watch it grow and take off, especially these last couple months or so. It's been great. So thank you guys so much. And I was just mentioning this off air to my guests that I'm probably going to learn as much as you guys are, because this is something that we're discussing that I don't have a lot of experience, at least in the practical sense. So I know I'm going to learn a lot, and hopefully you guys listening too will learn as well. We're going to talk about the 1-2-2 defense today. So for those of you who are defensive minded like me, this should be great. And even if you don't run a 1-2-2, this might get you thinking a little bit about it, or maybe give you some ideas of refining it or implementing it, or just seeking out more resources about it. But I think my guest today is going to be a great resource of knowledge about it, who actually requested that he wanted to talk about it. So I'm really excited to hear him talk about it. I'm joined today by Coach John Kruse. Coach, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Like I said, this is something that I'm looking forward to learning about myself, and looking forward to hearing your knowledge about it. So this should be great. So Coach, let's go ahead and get started. Where's the game of basketball taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you, and where are you currently at right now?
Well, I born and raised in Missouri, so I've spent my whole life in Missouri, mid-Missouri mostly, and grew up playing the sport, being around just sports in general. So when I went through college, I knew I wanted to do something with sports, since it's been a big part of my life and my family's life, and figured that education would help me do that as best as I could. So decided to be a history teacher, and that started my coaching journey. Spent the first 8 years of my career in mid-Missouri at some small schools that were all about 200 students, 9th through 12th grade. And then the last 2 years, I've recently just moved to Northwest Missouri, where I have little to no ties at all, actually. And my wife and I just decided to get a change of scenery. We moved to the Northwest, and I'm now coaching at a school about the same size as I have been my whole career, called West Platte. It's in Weston, Missouri. We're right on the Missouri-Kansas border. So great school. Definitely love the transition that my wife and I have both made. So very happy with where we're at, and taking over the West Platte program. So it's been about 10 years total for me coaching here.
So as somebody who's been at one school for a pretty decent amount of time, I just wanted to ask, what have you noticed change in the past 10 years? Have there been things that you've noticed that have been different? Are there things that have stayed the same? What are some trends, or maybe things that have stayed constant throughout that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably the biggest difference that I've noticed in just the last decade of coaching is just the advent of the 3-point line. Just people
Sure.
using that more as an advantage. Even in that the level that I coach at is pretty much middle of the road in Missouri, a little smaller end of the schools in the state. So, but even at our level, we see lots of teams just shooting way more threes than I did definitely 10 years ago, and definitely when I played too. So, it's not uncommon for us to, my team shoots a bunch of threes, so we'll shoot 30 or so a game, but there's also, the teams that we play against also shoot about that same number. So for the most part anyway, but that's probably the biggest difference I've seen, is just the focus on using the 3-point line as a weapon, and utilizing different and creative ways to get open looks from three, and to use that as a weapon.
And then one more follow-up to that, because I know I have my own experience with the 3-point shot and girls coming in who shoot or try to shoot the 3-point shot? Do you find yourself having to do a lot of correction with like form and mechanics? Because at least for me, in my experience, what I see, it looks like it's all over the place in terms of form, especially from the 3-point line. Do you see that as well?
Yes, for sure. The school I'm at right now, I'm lucky enough to be both the seventh and eighth grade coach and the high school coach, and our seasons overlap, for a little while there, and keeps me busy. But one of the reasons why I was interested in that is exactly what you just said. Is my first year in the district, we still do struggle with putting the ball in the hole and a very inconsistent shooting form and things like that. So I thought the younger I can get involved with, the age groups here, the better that could be. And we spend a ton of time shooting and a ton of time correcting form and smoothing those things out as we go. But yeah, I definitely would agree with you on that. And I'm not sure why that is, but it's definitely something that needs to be a focus at the lower levels. I think that's probably across the country, not just, in Arizona or Missouri, but
yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely something that seems to get overlooked at the younger ages, at least at different age groups. So yeah, that's a huge focal point for us for sure.
And a big thank you to all those who do coach and teach basketball at the youth level and the middle school level. There's so much that those coaches do that when it's done well and properly, it's just such a huge difference once they get to high school and beyond. So huge thanks to all those teaching and coaching basketball at that level for sure. Now, Coach, one of the things I noticed, I was looking at your Twitter a couple of days ago, is that you have a tweet that, as of the time of this recording, is pinned, and it's about small-sided games. And I think that there seems to be more of a push towards that, and I think that that's a good thing about using small-sided games. So wanted to ask you, what is the importance of small-sided games for you, and why do you personally like having them and running with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. The small-sided games movement in coaching is still relatively young. I think there's still a lot of people at all levels, from youth all the way through college, that don't utilize it probably the way they should. And a big reason for that, I think, is just because basketball, a lot of people coach it the way they were coached, or they coach it the way they played it, and so that there tends to be lots of recycling of old information, using the same drills that you used on your high school team or your college team with the team that you currently coach. And I definitely fell into that category when I first started teaching, because, you only do the best you know how to do. And if you don't know any better, then you fall back on what you learned. So I know that when I first started coaching, every time my team would go through a rough patch, I would think, man, I got to get a new drill in here. We didn't rebound well last night, so let's find some rebounding drills, and you'd go see like a Tom Izzo rebounding drill. And it didn't take me long to figure out that, like, pretty much everybody's doing the same thing. And so that the question I kept asking is, like, there has to be a better way out there. I just have to find it. Where do I need to look? And that led me, on a deep dive through different resources on the internet and reaching out to different coaches all across the country. And eventually I ran across Chris Oliver and basketball immersion and those things. And that led me down the rabbit hole of small-sided games and looking at the science of how people can acquire skills faster, European models of skill development for the youth ages, and just things like that led me to really see that there's so much more to basketball than what my experiences were as a player and as a young coach, and that I just needed to do things better. So the real benefit that I see from them is two things, really. Number one is it makes practice more fun. When
Sure.
You're playing a game that simulates a skill that the players are going to use, you as the coach, you're probably locked in on the execution of the skill, and adding restraints or taking one away maybe to make things difficult or easier depending on the situation. But they're getting a ton better, and they think they're playing a game. And that's really what it's all about. When they're having fun, the engagement level goes way up, the learning goes way up, and their skill acquisition is much, much faster. And so those are the two reasons why I love them, is the amount of fun that the players have doing it that way, and also how much quicker your team seems to get better through the process of using small-sided games and whatever your philosophy is.
And I think in my experience, definitely running different forms of small-sided games, I think it definitely can get chaotic, but I think that's also in a good way. I sometimes think that when I do drills, they're almost like too clean. They're almost like too perfect, and it doesn't necessarily represent all the time what an actual basketball game is. I don't know if you've had that experience yourself, but I know that's just kind of something I've noticed when I do drills versus like maybe more small-sided games and competitive type things.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think as coaches, we like that feeling that it gives us that we're in control. This looks clean, this looks crisp, this must be going well. And what you learn is like basketball is, I mean, we all know it, but I think we don't translate it to our practices all the time. Is basketball is really not clean and not pretty all the time. Most of the time it isn't. And so the more opportunities we can put our players in situations where they have to struggle to find the solution, the better it's going to be. And it took a while for me to learn that. And definitely when you start shifting from like the block practice to the small-sided games approach, it takes quite a bit of a letting go from the coaching perspective. Like you have to be willing to let it get ugly. And you can't be afraid to step in and stop a drill and correct things and walk out of a practice going, man, that was absolutely hideous. And I have no idea if we got any better. Sometimes you have days like that. But then as you stick with it, and you'll start to see the progression. And when the light bulb finally clicks for your players, because they survive some tough situations and their skills are getting better, it's pretty fun. And they start to see progress, then you start to see progress, and then that's when things really start rolling in the right direction. But that takes a lot of faith from the coach. You
Yeah,
have to be willing
exactly.
to let things get ugly.
Yeah, and just like you said, you kind of have to stick with it. You kind of have this like stick-to-itiveness with it, that you believe that, okay, it's going to look ugly. It's not going to be maybe the cleanest looking thing. I might not film this and put this on YouTube, or my athletic director might look at me like, whoa, what is going on? But if you believe in it and you know the benefit of it and you stick with it over time, like you said, I definitely for sure think there's benefit in that ugliness, and there's a lot of hidden gems and teachable moments within there. So yeah, I'm glad that we had that little discussion there, because I think that just having those small-sided games and just anything to kind of get away from just repetition and things that don't necessarily translate on the court, I think is always a benefit to at least consider. So great. All right, Coach. 1-2-2. As I mentioned beginning, it's not something I see a lot. Maybe it's just the competition I play, but I don't see it a lot personally. So I'm just really curious to start with, just from a philosophy standpoint, why do you like the 1-2-2 over other defensive forms? Like, what benefits have you seen over your time implementing it?
Well, it was actually, my philosophy has really evolved over the years into liking the 1-2-2, and I have to give a lot of credit to some other coaches that are around me here in Missouri that really are, spectacular at teaching it and have had a ton of success. But at my previous school in mid-Missouri, there's a program there called Boonville, Missouri, and their girls coach, his name's Jarrett Hunziker, who's just the master of the 1-2-2 ball press is what he calls it. And they are just relentless 3/4 court for the most part, 1-2-2 pressure. And my teams would run against his teams every now and then in different tournaments and things throughout the year. And it just, after a couple times of playing them, I really just started to watch them play more any chance I got. And I just started to really dig in and be like, man, what they do in a zone is what we try to do in man-to-man. And that was my original philosophy, was just, man-to-man defense, pressure the ball. We were definitely a pressure man-to-man, forced to a checkpoint and those types of things. So the more I watched them play, the more I was like, I think this is something that would be easier to teach, allows you to play a few more girls, and lets you play a little faster than what we were doing. And so, I started talking to Coach Hunziker a little bit, and we bounced ideas back, and he pretty much convinced me that, hey, you can do a lot of things with this. So ultimately, long story short, what sold me on it is it's a super flexible defense. You can kind of tailor it to your group of girls or your group of players, regardless of size or speed. You can play it different ways to make it fit your group. And you can also tailor it to who you're playing. If they got good shooters, you can shadow them. If they got a good post player, you can sag off a little bit more. There's lots of different things you can do. And then the second reason why is just the simplicity of the defense was something that I just love, that, we don't have to spend tons and tons of time and practice going over, rotating and help the helper, all those complex situations that can come with playing man-to-man all the time that we were spending all this time on. Zone's pretty simple. You've got 2 or 3 slides per position. There's specific ways people try to exploit it. You put your girls in those situations too, where they're used to seeing different attacks, and then you just really focus on, playing hard and pressuring the ball and all the same things that every good man-to-man defense does. So the flexibility and simplicity was something that I just gravitated towards, and it allowed us to still fit the defensive philosophy that I've always appreciated, which is, just forcing as many turnovers as you can without being reckless, and just being able to play a lot of kids, a lot of minutes, get the ball up and down the court quickly, and it allowed us to check all those boxes. So once we started messing around with it, it just kind of stuck, and I've used it ever since. So that's pretty much the 2 reasons why I decided to switch to it.
Now let's talk about just from a implementation standpoint. You have the 1-2-2. You have the 1, and in my experience, whether it's 1-2-2 or 1-3-1 or whatever sort of defense has that 1 in there, whoever that 1 is going to be needs to be on it. They need to be a certain type of player to really get the most out of that defense, at least from what I've seen, but I'll certainly let you speak to it. So for that player who's going to be the 1 in the 1-2-2, what do you need that player to do? What do you need that player to act like? What do you need for them to be accomplishing in order for your defense to be successful?
Yeah, that's probably the most important part of your 1-2-2 is going to be that top 1. And so we identify the players as 1s, and then the 2s are the guards behind them, and then the 3s are the post players behind the guards. And so we call that our 1, like you referenced. And, I've had different types of 1s over the last few years. And like this year, I have a freshman point guard who's about 5'2", maybe 90 pounds. And she plays that position way different than any girl I ever have. And so the key is, no matter how you play it, that 1 has to be your tone setter. They have to be somebody who can harass the ball, but they have to be smart enough to know, like, they can't do it all by themselves the whole game. So what we try to do now at the school I'm at is we 3/4 court press almost the entire game. And our 1's job is to get the ball to a side and then force it down into where our 2s are, our ball side 2. And then they work together to trap the ball in different areas. And so that's what our current point guard, she's really, really good on the ball. And teams have a hard time getting around her, and she's small and she's got great hands. So sometimes, when we play bigger teams, they can just look right over her head, and it's a little less effective. But that's when you have, as a coach, you can make an adjustment, you peel them back. Maybe you don't pressure as much, but definitely the most important thing for that top girl is just a relentless motor, and just understanding, like, when to pressure, when to force them to a side, keeping people in front of you when you're in the quarter court. Things like that are just invaluable. They have to have a little bit of a dog mentality, can't get tired. And even if they are tired, nobody knows it but them and maybe me, but that's kind of the key. You just have to have a girl up there that can just go crazy, and will give you everything they got for half a quarter, if you can get it that much out of them, and then you can rotate different girls through there. And that's the key for us. We've got about 3 girls right now that can play that one spot, and we rotate them fairly regularly, just to keep them fresh and keep them moving. But I would just say that that relentless attitude of pressuring the ball no matter what's happening is definitely a key for that one spot.
So as a follow-up to that, and this is a bit of a stereotype, but I coach girls, so I'm well aware of it. And we've actually talked to other guests who've brought this up before, that typically girls compared to guys, though I don't know what the percentages are, but typically girls tend to be more one-handed dominant when they get the ball. Do you find that situation where your one is able to easily force like a weak hand and force the side that way, or have you not seen that so much? What's the situation like with the ball handling that you've seen?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I know my team's very one-sided. I mean, we are right-hand dominant for sure, which I'm sure is the case for most teams. But yeah, we see that a lot. Now, currently in the area that we play in Northwest Missouri, we have a lot of good guards around here. So those really good guards in our area can go both ways, and that can be a bit of a problem. But we talk about it, and we definitely let our one know, hey, force her left or force her right, depending on the situation. But one thing that I haven't done much at this current school I'm at, but I did at my previous school, we didn't press as much. We just played pretty much a half court 1-2-2. We would trap a little, but most of it was just keep the ball in front of us, contest every shot. And one thing we really worked on a lot at that school is when they came down and put it to one side, we just tried to keep it on that side, whether it was left or right. We would try to deny reversals and different things. And that group I had at that school was really, really good at that. And so it's not so much their weak hand side, but just taking away half of the court, I think, is super valuable, and something you can definitely do in a 1-2-2 a little bit easier than maybe people realize. So yeah, there's a lot to that. I think you make a great point there.
And so with the next set, so the next set of I guess twos here in the 1-2-2, so that actually it's that first set of twos. You mentioned before about how they're the ones, ideally, if possible, looking to get a trap and looking to coordinate that with the one who's up top. Are there any other real refining points or teaching moments that you want to make sure that that first line of twos is aware of and paying attention to in order to do this correctly?
Yeah, the one thing when if you're thinking about implementing this that I've learned is if you're going to trap a lot out of it, then you really have to spend some time teaching your girls or your boys, whatever program you're in charge of, is the value of a good trap and how you do that. We were really bad at the beginning of this year. We would get somebody forced to a side. They'd come to about that half court corner area. We would trap, and then we'd reach in and try to steal the ball and foul,
I think we've all been there for sure. Yep.
Oh yeah. And just little things like that take a lot of time for them to understand. So with the twos, they're very similar to the ones, really. Their effort level has to be pretty high consistently. And the ball side too has to be willing to step in front of a girl that's dribbling most of the time full speed, and has to be able to stick her chest in the way there and slow the ball down and not let them cross over into the middle, which is sometimes a tough task to ask. But then the backside two girl has to understand where the middle is. And sometimes I think players struggle with understanding that the middle moves all the time. And a lot of, especially good teams, they're not going to get the ball into the middle the same way every time for every possession in the game. Sometimes they flash somebody from the backside. Sometimes they just cut somebody from the front of the zone into it. There's different ways that people do it. And the other thing is when somebody's in the middle, that doesn't mean they're just going to stand there next to you. They're going to move, and the two has to adapt, whether that pulls them further away from the ball or closer to the basket, or, not just being disciplined enough to take away the middle, but don't chase people. And sometimes that just takes some experience and some, game time for them to understand, like, hey, this isn't the same thing every time, and I have to be on my toes and be bouncing and ready to take away the middle. But if the ball gets reversed, I got to get to the other side of the court and cut the reversal attack off. So for the twos, definitely just being super active and being able to run sideline to sideline. The more they can do that, the better your defense is going to be, which is, whether you're playing man to man or anything, if you got girls that can go side to side, you're going to be in good shape. But that's definitely what we look for in at that two spot, is the ability to trap without fouling, the ability to take away the middle when you're on the weak side, and just the basic understanding of how to cover your area without getting lost, especially when the ball gets reversed, and keeping it out of the middle at all costs.
Now, one of the big things that drive coaches crazy, and myself included, is those reach in fouls there on the trap when you've done all that work and you reach in and foul, and it's drives a lot of coaches crazy for sure. So in your experience running it, if it's done well and there's not that reach in foul, what have you noticed in terms of turnovers? Is it bad passes that have been intercepted on the weak side? Has it been backcourt violations, just traveling calls? What have you seen as like the ideal like situation to get out of it? And maybe also in practice, what have you also seen to your benefit in terms of turnovers that you get out of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think any team that presses, they want to force live ball turnovers, right? So the ones that we can get ahead and score on. And that's another main reason why we decided to commit to this at this program I'm at now, is if we're struggling to score, we want as many opportunities to put the ball in the basket as possible. And so this really helps us with that. We went from last year, excuse me, from forcing, 15 to 20 turnovers, which isn't great, to this year we're forcing over 30 a game. And so, what we see is a lot of different types. What we get a lot is, a team will bring it up one side of the court. We'll start to shift our zone to trap them, and they'll reverse it quickly to the other side. And that girl on the weak side will start speed dribbling up the side, or once weak side two that's sprinting to the strong side now, she'll cut it off, and our one will come and close the gate behind her, and that kind of surprises them, and they'll, kind of stutter their feet and travel a little bit. We get that a lot. The other thing too is in that same situation on a reversal, we might slow down the attack off the reversal, and they may try to skip it and they throw it out of bounds. So we get those two things a lot, just the simple travel violations when, an unexpected trap might be coming from behind, or the rushed, pass over top of the teammate's head out of bounds, something like that. When those two things aren't happening though, what we get a lot of is when the ball is in a trap, they may get us out, they may pass out of the trap one time, but that second time on our rotation, we get a lot of two-pass steals. So they reverse it out of a trap back towards the middle of the floor, and they're trying to get it quickly to the other side. And our backside two that ran from the middle to her new position there usually can shoot the gap and get that steal. So those are the two things that we see a lot. So I guess I don't know if that really answered your question. We see a mixture of all those types of turnovers, but we definitely encourage the live ones.
I think the big part of emphasis, it seems, is that getting those live ball turnovers, how much work is involved, where once the trap is set, in a way that could just be like the beginning for what you're trying to get out of your 1-2-2. Like the trap is done, and maybe in a perfect world you're going to get something out of that, but it's going to still possibly require a lot of work from the other two who's in the middle or protecting the other side, or possibly, as you mentioned, your one having to scramble and get all the way to the other side to go and set another trap. So it doesn't seem like you can just sort of rest once that initial trap has been put in place.
Oh, definitely not. And that's something, we emphasize all the time, is like, we want the game to be as chaotic as we can possibly get it. And so to do that, we can't have anybody, we talk about bouncing all the time. We're always on our toes bouncing. We should never be flat-footed. And that's a big reason why, is we attack all the time, and we want, even on reversals, we want a second trap if we can get it. And you know, we spend a lot of time selling that to the girls, because really when you face a trapping defense, most of the time it's just the strong side trap. They get it on that one side, and if you can reverse it, then you've got something good. Well, we really try to emphasize, you know, teams are going to reverse it, but hopefully we're quick enough that when they reverse it, they're reversing it into another trap, and that can surprise them. And that's kind of our goal there. But definitely the more active you are, the better. And we sell this to the girls too, that, you know, the first quarter we may not get a ton of turnovers. Even the second quarter, if it, you know, we may not get that many more, but we can definitely start to see by the end of the third, beginning of the fourth, teams are starting to just maybe not get tired, but get tired of us. You know, they're tired of dealing with it. They're tired of getting trapped, tired of the same girl in their face, and getting trapped and getting a deflection on their passes, and just things being contested all the time, that eventually we always seem to hit a little spurt where we'll get 2 or 3 steals for 2 or 3 buckets late. Just things like that. It's kind of like, you know, a war of attrition. You just kind of wear them down, and eventually you hope that by the end of the game you've cracked it a little bit, that you've made a nice little run that can give you a lead.
So with how active you expect your team to be, how deep are you going into your bench? How quickly are you subbing people in and out to keep your defense as fresh as possible on the court?
Yeah, we dressed 14 girls on varsity this year. Now we don't play all 14. We have a consistent 9 that we play quite a bit. And so we'll go 11 deep, you know, if we get in some foul trouble and different things. We've got a good group of young girls that we trust, and that work really hard. So, you know, that's another selling point for the 1-2-2, is just, you know, if you play it and you're pressuring, you know, and trapping the way that we play it, which, you know, everybody's got to decide that on their own, that it's a great selling point for your girls, because they know they're going to play. The way that we play and how hard we play, we need as many girls as we can. So, you know, most nights we go 9 to 11 deep, and we're fortunate this year that we've really got, you know, those 11 girls are all pretty much the same skill level, and they're all very similar. So that definitely makes life easier, but that won't always be the case. So, you know, ideally, I'm thinking you're probably going to need 8 or 9 girls that you really can trust, and that you can throw out there and really harass people to make it through a 32-minute game like we have here in Missouri.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the selling point, that not only are other people going to play, but they absolutely are needed to play and to do their job as well, because you want to keep that defense as fresh as possible. But of course, you always want your players to be in the best shape as possible too. But in a perfect world, like you said, you're harassing that other team, getting them tired, getting them annoyed, and making that spurt like you mentioned. Now, with the back two, always find it really interesting what people do, whether it's a full court or a 3/4 court situation with that back line. So since you got 2 players there in the back, are they serving just with rim protection? Are they looking for double team opportunities with the 2 in front? Or are they looking to trap as well? Take us through what that looks like, and does it change depending on the size of the player and the type of player that's back there?
Yeah, you know, that I think when we were talking about the 1, I mentioned that might be your most important part, but you know, the longer I do it, the more I'm starting to realize the better your 3s are on the back, the better your press is going to be overall. So our general rules for our 3s is, you know, when the ball's, like, let's say it's coming up the court on the left side, then our left side 3 is taking away the sideline, and our weak side 3 would be on the midline of the court, kind of as, you know, acting as that basket protector. So they're both kind of on a string, you know, when one goes to the sideline, the other's in the middle. And if the ball gets reversed, then they just would switch those spots. So you go from the middle to the sideline and sideline to the middle. And we always tell them, you know, the number 1 rule for the 3s is nobody can get behind you. And so if they run somebody deep, you know, the girl, one of our 3s has to take them. And so we've actually done some different things this year where, depending on personnel who's back there, we have some 3s that move better than others. So we'll almost stack those 2 3s and we'll have one high, one low, one about the top of the 3-point line on our end, and we'll do like a diamond in one almost. So we'll do things like that, and it's definitely personnel driven. But for the most part, we want them to be as active as the twos, and our general rule, again, I stole all these things from Coach Hunziker at Boonville, but if they dribble across half court, we want our 1 and 2 to trap. If they pass it over half court, then we want our 3 to slow it down and our 2 to run from the backside and trap. So the ball sides 2 and 3 would trap a pass over half court. So definitely the more athletic you can be on that back end, the more successful you'll be if you're pressuring. So that's what we try to do. We always try to make sure we have some speed on that backside as best we can. And also we really put a lot of thought into rebounding down there, like which 2 of our girls can move, but also are decent rebounders. And that's easy for me to sit here and say because we aren't very big at West Platte. So most of my girls do move very, very well, and they run sideline to sideline. They're pretty quick. So we can mix and match a lot of different girls in a lot of different positions there, which can give teams some problems at times.
Well, I feel like those in the back line, the threes that you mentioned, the ones in the back and the 1-2-2, one of the real important roles that they kind of serve is they can kind of see everything in front of them. Do you require like any particular level of communication from those in the back line, those threes, like you mentioned, because they're able to see the whole court, or what does that sort of look like?
Yeah, definitely. We tell our threes all the time that, they have to be our quarterbacks. They're the ones like pre-snap reads before the ball's being thrown in, off a dead ball or anything like that, that they're back at about half courts where we start them a little bit further back. And they're talking about where's the middle girl coming from. If they see a girl flashing into the middle, they're talking to the twos, step up, step back, step in. And we work on all those things because they are the ones that really do see everything. So the more vocal they are, the better it is for everyone. So we definitely emphasize those things.
And in the situations where, let's just say it comes down to the rim protector and it's, a one-on-one situation and somebody in your back line has to protect the rim, in those experiences, have you found that you're still able to, have success and still force a bad shot? Does it get a little tricky back there? I'm just curious when it gets down to that very last line of defense, when it's just almost that one-on-one situation with one player protecting the rim. What has your experience been when it gets to that point?
Yeah, we definitely work on that quite a bit, and we tell our girl if they're in that situation that their number one job is to protect the rim. Don't come running out of the lane towards the 3-point line and just give up an easy layup by that girl just blowing right past us. So we talk about, we call it bluff and peel. So we'll like act like we're coming out, but we'll stay in on the lane and we'll kind of just, jab in and out at the ball. But the one thing that really helps us is usually those situations happen because the ball gets passed over our heads. And so we may have a trap, around half court or before half court. And if we see a ball, our rule is if the ball goes over our head, you are immediately sprinting back to the lane. And we definitely put a huge emphasis on our backside too. So if it's on the left side and our 1 and 2 are approaching a trap and maybe their point guard throws it over our 1 and 2 up the sideline to a girl on their team, and now it's just ball side threes, or maybe our ball side 3 tried to steal it and missed it. So now it's their girl heading towards our rim with the backside 3 standing in the lane. Well, when all that's taking place, as soon as that point guard throws that ball up the sideline, our backside 2 better be sprinting all the way down to that backside block on the other end of the floor.
Yeah.
And we sell it to them as, that's your regular zone slide anyway. When the ball's away from us, you have to drop on the backside. So you better get there as soon as possible because you're already late to the party. And so we emphasize that a lot. And we get a ton of those situations where, not a ton, but it happens regularly where a girl will be driving in towards our backside 3 and they'll try to dump it down to a girl on their team on the weak side, and our backside 2 flies in and knocks it out of bounds, And to us, I know like that's probably, most coaches would look at that and be like, oh man, we're living dangerously, but we love that because we're trying to get the game that fast. And anytime we can disrupt, with a deflection or a tip out of bounds, I mean, we love that stuff. Our girls love it. They go crazy. And that's kind of what we want, so we feel like that's playing into how we want the game to go.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you may have alluded to this earlier. And this is kind of the situation I know that I personally have faced. I know other coaches have faced as well, where we talked a couple of times about the idea of things like being chaotic and things being kind of messy. I know for a lot of the teams that I've worked with or coached, one of the reasons why I do that personally is because if we just got into a game where it was half court against half court, I know I would be putting my team at a disadvantage. Is that something that you might have alluded to earlier? Is that something that you kind of feel where you don't necessarily want to be getting into a half court versus half court game and you're perfectly happy and want things to be messy and chaotic?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we want things to be as crazy and hectic as we can possibly get them. And not that we're afraid of a half court game, but that's definitely not our strength. So
Right.
Anytime we can get the game up and down, and that's that's my offensive philosophy anyway, where we spend a great deal of time on offense and transition and playing with advantages and different things like that. So anytime we can get the game faster paced, we're going to do it, and we definitely want that chaotic nature definitely going up and down the court.
So let's kind of circle back almost to when we talked about small sided games, talked about practice situations and things a little bit earlier. So when it comes to refining and implementing and checking to make sure that your that your 1-2-2 is going where you need it to, what are you emphasizing and going over in practice? What skills or different things are you doing to kind of refine, teach, and just keep improving your 1-2-2 in a practice situation?
Yeah, we talk about two things pretty regularly every day. Number one is pressure is one thing, but we want disruption, and that to me they go hand in hand, but they're two different things. And so we talk about that a lot. And the second thing we talk about is just being engaged, like always locked in. Is this the correct slide? Am I communicating with my teammates? Are my hands high in a trap? Am I not reaching in? Those types of things.
Yep.
But we spend a great deal of time on, understanding that disruption doesn't have to be super difficult. Like, you don't have to do anything fancy to get teams out of their rhythm. But, we talk a lot about, this is, this team, they like to go to the right side of the floor. And this guard really likes to take 2 dribbles right, crossover left. And then, we'll just throw it out to the girls. So how can we disrupt that? And so we're constantly working on, what is it that they want to do? And then more importantly, what are we doing to make them uncomfortable and take some things away? And what's interesting is this year, we just fully 100% dedicated ourselves to the 1-2-2 at this new school. The previous school I was at, we did it all the time and no other defense. And so when I got up here, I thought I had a great group that would be good for pressure man, and we did it, and we were okay. But we started doing the 1-2-2 late last year, and the girls just loved it. So we just fully committed to it this year. So the more we've done it, the more they've really bought into that, and the better they've got at understanding just, if I can just get my fingertips on a ball, that's disruptive. If I can just stop a girl dribbling, a girl's going up the right side, and if I can just make her stop and do a pullback dribble, I just disrupted their whole flow. And so we're constantly looking at little opportunities in practice to praise when somebody's been disruptive, just turning a dribbler, just little things like that. So we actually chart that too. Coaches chart deflections all the time, and we do too, but we call them disruptions. So anytime we feel like we made the offense do something they weren't planning on doing, we chart that and we keep a little leaderboard of it. And the girls really get into that, and they've really bought into, that idea of just being as active and disruptive as possible, especially on the ball and off the ball too. There's some things we do there, but that's the first thing and probably most important.
And that idea of just being just super active and just being quick on your feet and being able to get into the correct position, is that something that you really had to work on and almost establish as like a culture type thing, or did you just have to like give the direction and then the girls were on it? I'm always curious because sometimes I feel like it should maybe come naturally that players are always like active and moving on their feet, but I know that always isn't the case. So I'm curious what that's been like with this program that you're in.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think coaches are always kind of looking for that answer. What how can I ramp up my team's intensity, and how can I get them to play harder? And that's always a thing. But I think just the first thing you have to do is sell them on just how hard it is they really have to play. And I know what benefited us early in the year is we implemented it and we got down the basics. They knew balls here, I'm on the ball, or I'm protecting the middle, or I've got the bat. Like they picked that up pretty quick. But one thing that we really did is we spent, like I mentioned, Coach Hunziker in Mid-Missouri a couple times, and he was gracious enough to send us some film so we could watch their team play. They're a much bigger school. And so just to see the different, we spent a lot of time just watching another team do it that has had success with it. And so they spent a lot of time, especially early in the year, watching, well, this is how, do you notice how they constantly are in the face of the offense? The offense can't settle. All the offense is doing is trying to survive. That's what we're trying to do. And you could just see us gradually starting to understand, like, okay, that right there, they reversed it and I kind of backed away and I needed to go attack the ball. So it's to answer your question, it's kind of like the small-sided games conversation we had earlier is you have to just stay on it and you have to set the bar high and you have to have the standard that, we're going to play this one way and we're going to do it every single day in practice and games, and we're not going to waver from it. And that's another benefit of playing a lot of girls is if somebody is wavering from it, you've got another one that won't. And so you throw them in there and then you let them know like, hey, how you were doing this and why you came out is because, your level of intensity isn't where we need it to be. So we're going to give you another shot here in about 2 minutes, be ready to go. And then most of the time that gets the message delivered, so it's just a consistency thing, demand it and just stick with it. And eventually it just becomes part of who you are. You mentioned the cultural part of it. And that's definitely a big thing. Girls and guys are the same way. They like to press, everybody likes to press and they like to play this way because it's fun. You get to run at people, you get to play hard all the time, and it's kind of fast and, crazy, and they like to do it. So it usually comes pretty naturally once you start emphasizing it and letting them know just how hard they have to do it.
And if it's one of those non-negotiable things, it's part of your program and part of your culture, then it sounds like they're going to get to it pretty quickly. And, as some coaches would say, well, they figure it out if they want to play and they want to get on the court. So that's one way to get them bought in for sure. So you've been running this and you have been sticking with this 1-2-2, which means you've seen the ways that other teams are going to try and attack it and try and break it down. So for coaches who might be thinking about implementing this 1-2-2, what should they be aware of that other teams are going to try and do to try and get what they want on the offensive end?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of different things that different teams try to do to us. Most teams, I would say, the stereotypical approach is the odd front zone, even front offense thing that pretty much everybody does. So we see a lot of 2-1-2 formations and teams trying to attack from the corner and things like that. But we also see some odd fronts where teams will match up with us and they'll have a girl in the short corner and a girl in the high post, and they'll treat it kind of like it's a 2-3 zone, so they'll hit the short corner, they'll dive the post, and they try to either hit that post diving to the front of the rim, or they will skip it backside for the three, things like that. But what I think gives us the most problems is teams that really can spread us out. And what I mean by that is if they go like that 2-1-2, but they don't put their girls in the corner, and they stick them in between our 2s and 3s. Where our girls have to think like, okay, that girl has the ball and I'm the 2 on that side. Do I get her, or is the 3 coming out to get her? And so just little things like that make our girls hesitate can give us some problems. And then obviously, if you have, like, this is maybe counterproductive when you think about a zone, you think about, you know, if you got shooters, you're in trouble. Actually, what kills us is if they have a girl in the middle that can pass, we have some difficulties with that. And they don't even have to be a great scorer, but just somebody who can get their hands on the ball and they know to turn and look opposite, or they can, you know, take one dribble and collapse everybody and then find their open teammate. Things like that give us lots and lots of problems. And we've even seen some teams that play with 2 posts, which I think is pretty interesting. So they'll have a 2-guard front and they'll put 2 girls on the elbows and then have like a baseline runner. And they'll hit the baseline runner, and the ball side elbow will drop down to the short corner, and the weak side elbow will kind of flash into the open gap on the ball side around the elbow area. So we see some really creative things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's really no different than any zone. Any type of inside out always is tough for us, like it is for any zone. So that's probably the big thing. Anything that attacks inside out will give us problems for sure.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I've been running different sorts of presses and things like that. The other thing too that I will always be a bit disruptive for a press is when you have a good ball handler, or a patient ball handler, somebody who's not rushed or doesn't get panicked by what other team is doing. I know I've seen that before, and in a perfect world, I'm sure you could just get everybody panicked and everybody kind of rushed. But sometimes you play against those really good players who aren't going to be panicked, and they're just going to make the smart play, and things sort of happen like that.
Definitely. We run into that pretty regularly. You know, this area of Missouri, there are some really good teams, and we are not a very big school, but you know, we're about 15 minutes from Kansas City, so we play some bigger schools, and so we'll run up against guards who just, you know, our little 5'2" and our 5'2" doesn't really bother them at all. And so then we have to make the adjustment that, you know, hey, our traps aren't going to bother them now, but what we're going to have to do is contain, you know. And so you kind of have to switch your mindset of, you know, it's still pressure, but it's a different kind of pressure. And we're playing like the long-term game at that standpoint, you know, just make them handle the ball, stay between them and the basket, get hands on passes, frustrate them when they have it, things like that, but don't give them anything easy. Don't foul them, you know? So yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, is that's when the adjustments come in, and you just have to coach your girls to understand that, hey, we're not going to be able to trap and take the ball from everybody. It's an unrealistic expectation. So, you know, we just have to be able to adapt to what the game's giving us, you know? And if our traps aren't producing turnovers, then let's just contain it, and let's make them at least work for 30 seconds to get a score, which I don't know about your experience, but in my experience in boys or girls basketball, the longer the offense has the ball, the worse that is for them usually. They'll take a bad shot, you'll get a turnover, something. So when we talk about that all the time, just the longer they possess it, typically the worse their shot they're going to get. You know, generally speaking.
I've noticed that too. And as long as we can secure the rebound, that's great. As long as we're getting the rebound and being able to get what we need to do and not giving up five different possessions on that, then yeah, we're going to be in business, and it's okay if they hold on to the ball for a little bit. So a lot of teams, when they are pretty disciplined and they are really used to seeing a lot of pressure, is they focus more on breaking the press, not necessarily trying to score right away on it. So what can your 1-2-2, what can it kind of fall back into, or what can it kind of go into in a half court setting if a team breaks it, but they're not looking to just score right away? Do you go into a 1-2-2 in the half court? What does that sort of look like?
Yeah, we do. And we just fall right back into a 1-2-2 again in the half court. And really it's no different than when we're in the full court or the 3/4 court. Is When the ball's on one side, if it's on that 2 side, she has the ball. If it goes to the corner, the 3 comes out and takes it. Backside 2 will drop. It's basic zone principles. When the ball's on the wing, a 2 will take it and the 1 will take away the high post. Backside 2 will start to drop. If it goes all the way down the corner, the 3 comes off the block, and she'll take the corner, and then the backside 2 will drop to the opposite block, and our backside 3 will front anything in the post. I think that's a pretty standard way that most people do it, but we'll do a lot of different things in the half court depending on the team that we're playing. Sometimes we'll trap, so we'll just do like a half court trap. So we're trapping literally everywhere on the court. We don't do that a ton, but there are times when we need to. We like to do that to end a quarter or start a quarter, or obviously if we're down, we'll do things like that. We like to just trap in the corners. So if they're in that 2-1-2 set and they're really working out of the corner, we'll run our 2 and our 3 together and trap them there. We just fall back into a 1-2-2. We'll do different things also where maybe the 3s don't rotate out to the corner, but we'll just take our top 3 girls and we'll tilt them when the ball goes to one side. So if they throw it down to the corner, our ball side 2 will take the corner, and then our 1 will take the next pass out of the corner, and then our backside 2 will be dropped in the middle of the lane, and she's got any skip pass out. And those aren't things that we just, religiously live by, that we do every time, but those are just wrinkles that we throw in to give people different looks if they're having success with different things they're doing on offense. Just again, that's the disruptive principle in our defense that we try to throw in different looks during the game.
And in your experience with the level of competition that you've played, once it gets into the half court situation, do you come across teams that try to shoot their way out of that zone? Are you going up against, teams that are just lighting it up from the outside, or are you able to kind of lock things in and be able to use your double teams and communication to sort of take that away? Or maybe they're just not that good of shooters. I don't know. I'll let you speak about it.
Yeah, again, it depends on who we play. We defensively this year, we've been pretty solid, and our level of competition is pretty good for our area. We're allowing about 37 points a game in a 32-minute game in Missouri. That's really good points wise, like points allowed wise. But we do see some teams that shoot a lot of 3s against us, and that's mainly because when we're pressing in the 3-quarter court, and we're pretty much always in a scramble mode, so there's times where things get away from us. But our ultimate goal is pressure the ball, disrupt the ball, let them shoot it quick, let's rebound it and run. And so we like, even if they're making a couple shots early, obviously you don't like when the ball goes in the hole, but if it's kind of getting the pace of the game where you want it to be, we're okay with that, as long as it's not consistently happening. And so we get a lot of 3s shot against us, but we work a lot about contesting those and taking those away from people, and we've gotten better at that as the season's gone on, for sure. We actually have a team in our conference that has a Division I post player who's just a sophomore. So that's a totally different animal there. And
Yeah.
When you got that girl running down the middle of the floor, obviously your attention's more there than it is on the perimeter. But so we see a lot of different things of different people to attack, but really it comes back to that disruption principle that we've been talking about. Is we just don't ever want the offense to settle. We don't ever want them to break the press and be like, okay, now we can get in this offense. And we just constantly want them to be putting the ball on the floor and not being able to survey what's going on. And we've struggled at that. That's hard to do, and we've struggled with that at times. And we'll get better at it the more we do it. But that's the ultimate goal. Just disrupt everything that they're doing. Don't let them stand and survey. Don't let them get set up. Don't let them dribble the ball up top for 12 seconds while their best shooter's running off, staggered screens all over the place, and just things like that.
And as we talked about a few different times, just to kind of put a bow on that, it is going to look messy. It is going to look chaotic. You may give up some looks, you may give up some scores, but it's really like the stick-to-itiveness and the belief in it, and just keep working at it. And as you mentioned, the belief that there might be some things you give up in the beginning and it may get a little chaotic, but it will probably, hopefully, in an ideal world, become like good chaos. And then you get the deflections, you get the turnovers, you get the steals, you really start to see the benefits out of it. But you have to stick with it is what it sounds
Yeah.
like is the big message there. You got to believe in it. You got to stick with it, and can't just abandon ship if things look ugly in the first, couple possessions necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that all coaches have to just decide. There's trade-offs to everything you do. You can't pressure all over the floor and never expect to give up a layup, and you can't run and trap everywhere and try to be disruptive on for 75 of the 84 feet on a high school court, and then get mad when a three goes through the net. Well, I mean, you're going to give up something. You just have to determine, can you live with whatever it is you're consistently giving up? And if you can't, then that's when you make those adjustments. But if you can, then you just sell your girls on it, and you just get to work and you go, and it just becomes a part of who you are. So that's a big part of it. You just can't, at the first sign of trouble, you can't just call a timeout and switch to something entirely different. You got to have faith in your preparation and faith in your team that they're going to do what you're asking them to do.
I like that use of the word faith for sure. I like that. Yeah, that just understand what you are going to have to give up, but then also understand the rewards and the things that you're working to, which make your defense successful. Great. So, Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first one here, which is, thinking back in your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I touched on this earlier in our conversation, but I just think a lot of coaches don't settle for doing things the way that they've always been done. Like, challenge yourself every day. Like, why am I doing this drill? What purpose does it serve? And I think you'll start, if you ask that question to yourself routinely, you'll start to see that at least a lot of coaches do a lot of things that really have no impact on winning and losing basketball games. And so, the whole small-sided games conversation we had earlier kind of lends itself to that. It's like, just work on the things that will actually translate to us winning games. Now, that's not to say, because I used to be this guy. I bought all the DVDs. I went to every clinic I could go to. I listened to Izzo and Gino Auriemma, and I listened to all these guys, and they're all obviously great coaches. And I definitely tell people all the time, like, steal all you can. You can take from me. You can take from whoever. Steal and use it, but understand that, like, usually the drill that you're stealing is not the solution to your problem. So just understanding, like, you can steal from everybody, but don't use everything you see, and try to cater things to what your team needs. And I think that may sound, there might be some coaches that listen to this and be like, well, yeah, that's what we all do. But I think, I don't know that tons of coaches really do that. I think they do 3-man weave, and they do traditional drills that, they've always done. And they think that, because they played on a really good team 20 years ago, that's what's going to translate to them having a really good team. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't. And so I would just, my best advice I can give anybody is just challenge yourself. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Is there a better way to do it? And put a plan in place for you to do things better, and then stick to it, and constantly, seek out opportunities to get better and to grow, and to do your research, and understand that there's no substitute for just jumping in and trying something. It is a game. I tell the girls that all the time. It's not life or death. It's a game. And so have some fun with it, and your team will appreciate that too. It's like, take risks. Don't just run something because your high school coach ran it. Go branch out, do things that you're interested in, help yourself grow. So just overall, just challenge yourself to be a better coach, I think is the best tip I can give.
Well, I like that part about, still find resources, go to those clinics, get the DVDs and everything. I remember a coach told me once that you may have to go to, 50 different, clinics, sessions, and all these things just to find something that works with your particular team that you have for that year. And then the following year, you might draw upon something from a clinic you went to 3 years ago. So I definitely agree that you need to, be taking in a whole bunch of information and trying always to get better, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to apply or should be applying all those things to the particular team that you have. Again, as I've also been told, I can run all these drills that I see like the UConn women's team do, but I don't have the UConn women's team, so it may look a little bit different if I try to run it, right?
Yeah, and I have a funny story about that, because one of the first coaching clinics I went to was in Chicago, and Gino Oriema was there, and he asked a couple questions. First thing he asked is, it was just pretty much high school coaches, and he said, "How many of you guys are college coaches?" And about 8 to 10 people raised their hand there, and he said, "Well, how many guys are in high school?" And then pretty much everybody raised their hand. And he said, "How many guys are in private schools?" And I'd say maybe half the coaches raised their hand. And he goes, "Well, you guys are smart." And he goes, "I'd never go anywhere I couldn't pick my own players." And so everybody kind of started laughing. And then he went on to say, the reason why he's saying that is because you have to understand that he's got a different level of talent than what everybody else is in. Just because UConn women are doing a drill doesn't mean you can take it and put it in yours and it's what's best for your players. And so that was his message, is like, I can do anything because I have the best women's players in the world. And so that's kind of what his message was to us. And that's always stuck with me. I heard that about 10 years ago, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I like that. No, and it's 100% true. And if Coach Ariema is saying it, I will certainly not disagree with that myself.
Right. I agree.
Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's a platform for you to kind of get out your closing message, kind of your final thought, your final idea. I kind of feel bad because I feel like you just really did a nice job on your previous answer, but I want to give you that floor anyway. So if you have any final thought or final message you want the listeners to hear, Coach, go ahead and go for it.
Okay. Well, the one thing I don't think I've mentioned that has just been invaluable to me in the last 10 years of me coaching is just finding a group of people that you can rely on as mentors. And you're always going to have, your local area coaches that you compete against, that you seem to, have those bonds with, just because you're, competitors with each other. But it's nice to find people who don't have a tie to your program that can look at it objectively. And so I've had, different mentors throughout the year, but I've found 2 different groups that I've been a part of that are just fantastic, that I want to give shout outs to. And I found them both on Twitter. The first one's Ramp, which it's fairly well known. It's the Radius Athletics membership program. It's run by a guy named Randy Sherman, who's just an absolutely brilliant basketball mind. So it's just a mentorship that he put together. He's got a bunch of coaches in there. He had over 100 last time I knew. And they just talk basketball literally 24/7. Has a big group chat with them all in there. And it's really awesome. I mean, it'll just help you simplify your approach to the game, and it'll help you grow as a coach very, very quickly. Coach Sherman also, he'll schedule out one-on-ones with you every month, or more frequently if you want it. And he'll just put his eyes on your team, and he'll help, or in a game, practice, whatever, and he'll help you kind of figure out what's, get you pointed in the right direction if you're struggling with different things. And I owe him a lot, because he really helped me cut out all the crap that I was doing that was absolutely unnecessary for basketball. So Ramp is a great thing. You can find them on Twitter. Coach Sherman's Twitter handle is @Radius Athletics. So I would definitely encourage people to reach out to him if you have any interest in that. He will absolutely help you be a better coach. The second one I have is another coaching group called Essential Coaching. And this is a relatively new one, started by 2 guys that are good friends of mine, Kyle Kavanaugh and Asim Rastogi, which they're both, Asim's actually currently a college coach, an assistant coach, and Kyle's been a former head coach too. And their approach to the mentorship program is a little different. It's not so much X and O based, even though the group does have a lot of X and O experts in it, but it's a more holistic basketball approach. So talking about like, building leaders and the holistic approach to making your team better, like how to deal with parents, how to deal with officials, how to develop leaders within your program, how to run captains meetings. Just an absolutely incredible group that has about 30 coaches in it, I think, at the current point in time. And it's just amazing. And it's absolutely transformed my whole program, everything outside of X's and O's. They've just completely shaped our program in a positive way. And those two guys are amazing. So I would encourage anybody, if you're interested in those things, to reach out to both Coach Sherman, who runs the RAMP program at Radius Athletics on Twitter. And then the Essential Coaching guys are, Asim Rastogi, which his Twitter handle is at RASTOGI _ ASEEM. Or you can reach out to Kyle, and his is at Coach K424. And if you reach out to them on Twitter, they can get you pointed in the right direction. I would encourage people to be in both of those mentor groups, honestly, because it would skyrocket your coaching development. And we owe that to our players, definitely. If we want them to be as good as we hope they can, then we have to return the favor in the coaching profession too. So those are my two tidbits here at the end.
I love it. I love sharing resources, love getting people connected with others who are passionate about the game and passionate about coaching, and just giving back in general. So anything to build that community, and like you mentioned, anything that makes us better, which makes us better for the kids that we serve, I'm all about it. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And appreciate you, Coach, for spending some time talking about 1-2-2, talk a little bit about practice, small-sided games, and some other topics that we got into. It was a lot of fun and really informative for me. I'm sure my listeners out there got a lot out of it too. So Coach Kruse, thank you for spending some time on that. Good luck with your season going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Definitely love talking with you. Glad to do it anytime.
Awesome. And thanks to all of you listening. Really appreciate it. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.